First, as a disclaimer, this will be triggering for some people and may be inappropriate for younger people. I also do not have any desire to harm or risk my life. If you do, the national hotline is 800-273-8255, or you can check into your local ER. There is an option for you. It may not be obvious, but there is. Now we start. Imagine getting ready for school on a regular morning and going through your normal routine. Wake up, brush your teeth, feed your cats, then make toast 7 times till it looks perfect. Wait, 7 times? That's a symptom of OCD. A regular thing someone does, but because of all the thoughts, you have to do some sort of repetitive behavior or compulsion to briefly relieve the anxiety. That's OCD. That's part of me. An illness that is misunderstood, and those who have it are mocked. I was born in August, right after Hurricane Katrina, and half an hour before my mom was to have a C-section. Pitted against from the start. Born with no working kidneys and my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, I had it rough, even in my first moments. I don't remember much from the first 6 years of my life, but my father had a disease of the brain and struggled with mental illness, so he wasn't the most present father figure. At age 6, my parents got divorced. My father moved to the Netherlands for 9 months, and I was left with a newly single mother and 4-year-old brother. I helped my mom with my brother and learned to take care of myself. But by the time my father returned, I was willing to be taken care of. 2 years went by, going back and forth to my mom and dad's house every week, wishing that the divorce never happened, being oblivious to how life can surprise you in terrible ways. My eyes were opened in 5th grade. I was nearly 10. My first mental illness, generalized anxiety disorder, was beginning to show itself, and then my mom got sick. At first it seemed like regular fatigue that comes from owning your own company and taking care of 2 children, but it very quickly turned into something more. Over the course of a few months, she got worse and worse until she could barely walk to the bathroom, but her doctor insisted that she was fine and it was normal. They were wrong. I was 10 as I watched my mother leave. Physically she was alive and there, but emotionally she was gone. I was 10 when I had to grow up so fast I almost didn't make it because I didn't have another option. I was 10 when I had to take care of myself, my brother, and sometimes my mom. And I was 10 when, as far as I knew, I was watching my mother die. She wouldn't die. Instead, after 9 months of her going to seemingly endless doctor's appointments, she was tentatively diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. A rather base name for such a destructive disease, I think. Simply, no matter how much sleep you get, you never wake up and feel rested, completely disintegrating your ability to take care of yourself and others, which in my case meant that my childhood ended at age 10, and it's also where my major mental health journey began. In 6th grade, I was still taking care of myself and brother with an increasing level of anxiety. Like many people with mental illness, I had my illness from the world, which with social anxiety can either be extremely easy or extremely difficult. I made excuses for the tears and panic attacks, anything to seem like what I thought was normal. I hid myself from the world to keep my secrets safe and to protect myself from seemingly never-ending abandonment. Anxiety is one of the more common and well-known mental illnesses, and is generally characterized by feeling anxiety strong enough that it affects the day-to-day activities of the person. For me, it completely wiped away my ability to function at times, but you would never know it. People don't realize that you could look at me and never know I was having a panic attack or breaking inside. In February of 6th grade, my mother moved in with my now stepfather, and I began to live with my single father full-time. Understandably, I was upset. I was now still helping to take care of my brother, and in school, and dealing with anxiety, and seeing my own mother for 2 hours a week. I mean, that's hard for everyone, but for me it was especially difficult. I had a history of trauma and was dealing with a lot of my own things. Of course, I don't blame my parents for anything. They tried their best, but I was still set up to be a wreck at all times. 6th grade went on, and I took the summer to try and relax, but as usual, I was still anxious. And this was one of my first encounters with depression. I spent summer hopeless and sad, surrounded by people who didn't understand my situation. I was desperate to find someone with similar life experiences, which I know is difficult, especially in this area. People here have a tendency to be privileged and even ignorant and oblivious. I tried to explain what was happening to the people closest to me, which isn't very many. But unsurprisingly, they found difficulty understanding the complex situation that they didn't think could ever happen and had never even been exposed to. I again spent another month of summer depressed, staying home, isolating, barely eating, and pretty much lifeless, drowning while everyone is breathing. I started 7th grade worse than ever, depressed and anxious. This was also when my OCD first began to show, but I didn't know it yet. I would spend 3 hours on 3 problems in math, knowing the content but having to do it so perfectly it took forever, or stressing out so much that all I could do was stare at it. Life was hard. I met with a therapist once a week, talking over my troubles and hoping she could stop the daily panic attacks that were running my life. Unfortunately, my anxiety was so severe it didn't work. Years of therapy, and I could still barely function. I would cry for hours on Sunday, dreading the following day of school. I continued to try and hide my illness, and although I regularly cried and had panic attacks during school, no one sees what they don't want to. My mother continued to sleep throughout the day, and I continued to worry about the never-ending cycle of sleep depression and anxiety, living like a zombie. Summer came and went, with the same cycle over and over. But this time, the incessant dread that came with classes, and hoping I would get a schedule I wanted with people I wanted, and knowing that I would drown if things got worse, created even more anxiety. In 8th grade, I hit rock bottom. I had panic attacks twice daily, I could barely do homework, I could barely study, and I could barely get myself to school. For those of you who don't know, panic attacks are terrifying. It's going from 1 to 10 in a matter of seconds, and then panicking more when you realize that you can barely breathe. It feels like you're dying, like the world is ending, like there's not much else to live for. At this point, I was slightly more open with my closest friends, but not much. Not many people knew, and those who did didn't understand. I could feel myself fading away from reality. A shell of myself, I continued to suffer in silence. I watched silently as people made fun of stereotypical mental illness and made up offensive jokes about it. All of this, and I continued to take care of myself and watch my mother's health go up and down, including a visit to the ER in an ambulance and emergency surgery. Regardless, I somehow managed to get through 8th grade, but I spent the summer unable to enjoy anything, courtesy of phenomenally bad anxiety disorder and OCD shining through. Constant anxiety about the classes I would get in my first year of high school, which I had been dreading for about 5 years, made it even worse. I didn't get the classes I wanted, which was normal, but it also caused multiple panic attacks and quite a few tears. 9th grade started, and everything took a turn for the worse, which I didn't think was possible. I was officially diagnosed with OCD. I could barely get through the school day and continued having daily or twice daily panic attacks. At this point, this was the 3rd time in my life where I thought things couldn't get worse. I was wrong. At the end of February, right as coronavirus started, at age 12, my brother was diagnosed with cancer, osteosarcoma, bone cancer. My life was falling apart. My brother, who I was extremely close with because of all the years taking care of him, might die. Cancer is one of the worst nightmares for every parent, family, and sibling. Plus, it came at a time where we thought things couldn't get much worse, and we found it hard to look on the bright side. I mean, who would? It's cancer. The disease that crushes dreams, causes so much pain, and takes so many lives. With surgeries on his leg, I was once again tasked with taking care of my brother. Not an easy thing when you've gone through trauma, depression, anxiety, and OCD. But I didn't have much of another option, so I endured. After 10 weeks of grueling chemotherapy, He had another surgery on his leg that removed approximately 23 centimeters of bone in his femur and removed his knee. Once again, my father and I were tasked to give him his every need and support him in every way possible. Keep in mind, all this time we were in quarantine, terrified that he would get coronavirus, because with no immune system, coronavirus is fatal. So far, that's my story. And now I get to the analytical part, which I know for some of you is torture, but it's still the most important part. I hid my illness because of fear and criticism, and fear of the stigma that comes with mental illness, being denied jobs, being laughed at, made fun of, and criticized for things that you weren't able to do or change. I wanted so badly to be normal, I never really thought of what my definition of normal was. For me, it was being the same as everyone else, ordinary. If we look at the stats, though, in any given year, 1 in 5 Americans will meet the criteria for a mental disorder. 46% of Americans will meet the criteria for a diagnosable mental illness sometime in their life, and nearly half of those develop it before they reach the age of 14. And although people with mental illnesses aren't more prevalent than those without, it's a lot closer than you would first think. Either way, now I'm able to think of my anxiety, depression, and OCD as a bit of a gift. Others still aren't. I tend to have more empathy than a normal person, and I'm also not ignorant or oblivious to life tragedies. But I have listened to people talk about being rejected from colleges and jobs because of their mental illness. I continue to listen about people who are wondering if they will get through high school, and I know many who literally almost didn't. At the root of this is a society unable to talk about mental illness, allowing people like me to crumble and break inside because they don't want to admit that something is wrong with society, and that emotional pain can be just as, or even more painful than physical pain. Even schools don't adapt to people with mental illness. A place for equal learning that doesn't support equal learning. When someone has a severe depressive episode, they are expected to make up their work on time unless they have accommodations, which are nearly always given when it's too late for it to help. Since 5th grade, I have suffered, and my schools did nothing to adapt for me. Your future opportunities shouldn't be determined by how your brain works. Mental illnesses are stereotyped as making people weak. Instead, I am strong. Maybe I'm broken and have difficulty trusting, but I have been through more than most people will go through in a lifetime, and I'm still here, trying to speak up so that no one has to go through my experience. Those who speak are ignored, and those who stay quiet suffer. I've seen people make fun of OCD because they don't understand it. They think OCD is liking something neat. Instead, I will spend an hour making sure that the windows and doors are locked, not 10 seconds trying to make my desk neat. People with mental illnesses are ridiculed and judged because their brain is wired differently, and sometimes it's from chemical imbalances. We don't entirely know for sure for most of them. But you wouldn't judge someone for having diabetes because their bodies can't produce enough insulin. So why would you ridicule someone with a mental illness whose body may not produce enough serotonin? Thank you.